Have you ever found yourself trapped, manipulated by not one, but two people at the same time, each pulling you in different directions, leaving you shocked and unsure who to trust? Picture this. Your friend, the kind of guy who'd buy a live lion just to show off at a party, suddenly becomes the target of an accusation so horrific it turns your stomach. But what if the person making that claim was manipulating everyone, including you, into a nightmare? This is how my life turned upside down. You know Alex, right? My buddy. The guy who, no joke, bought a fully grown lion just to show off at a party. And when that magnificent, terrifying beast inevitably snapped and almost took a bite out of one of our friends, Alex did what Alex always did. He blamed his then-girlfriend, Rosalie. Somehow, she walked away from that one. But from that day on, you could feel it. Rosalie had a burning grudge against him. She was closer to me than any of Alex's other friends. So one random afternoon, she hit me up, asking to meet at a coffee shop. When I got there, she was already sitting, a ridiculously expensive drink waiting for me, practically pulling me into the chair. As I started to dig into whatever fancy pastry she'd ordered, she leaned in, her voice low and chilling, and dropped a bombshell. Alex needs to die. My fork clattered against the plate. She then told me that Alex hadn't just randomly blamed her for the lion incident. He'd done it because he needed her out of the way. She claimed he'd been systematically grooming her 11-year-old sister, Jade, and needed Rosalie in jail to continue his twisted agenda. I pressed her, hard, on how she knew, but she wouldn't budge, wouldn't give me a single detail. That alone gave me a weird, unsettling feeling, but I agreed to help. I mean, who would ever make up something so monstrous, so utterly depraved, about someone they once loved? No one's sane, right? The very next night, driven by a twisted sense of justice, we broke into Alex's place. I remember the broken lion cage was still there, a grim reminder of his past excesses. My heart was pounding, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I begged Rosalie not to do it, not to plant the drugs, but her eyes were cold, determined. She pulled out a bag of white powder, shoved it deep into Alex's drawer, and then, without a moment's hesitation, called the cops. They showed up, lights flashing, sirens wailing, and arrested Alex on the spot. Just like that, I almost felt sick with guilt, ruining the life of someone I'd called a friend. But then, Jade, Rosalie's 11-year-old sister, turned on her. They had always been incredibly close, but the minute Alex was arrested, Jade started blowing up Rosalie's phone with the nastiest, most hateful texts you could imagine. She called Alex the only person who truly understood her and cursed Rosalie for putting him in prison. A wave of relief washed over me. I thought, okay, we actually caught a predator. But then, just 3 days later, the bottom dropped out. Alex somehow made bail. And he came straight to my house. Apparently, he had hidden cameras installed at his place that the cops somehow missed, and he'd seen me with Rosalie. He walked into my living room without a knock, and I swear, I saw the glint of what looked like a knife tucked under his waistband. My blood ran cold. He sat down, staring me dead in the eye, and asked point blank, "What do you think I was doing with Jade, the 11-year-old girl?" My mind raced. No pedo, no predator would ever openly ask that. I was white as a sheet, but I told him everything I'd heard about Rosalie's accusations, about Jade's furious texts after his arrest. I told him it all just looked so suspicious. That's when he raised an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine hurt in his eyes. "Know why she cares about me that much, dude?" he asked, his voice unexpectedly soft. I stammered, Because you're a pedo?" He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "No, it's because I'm the only person in that girl's life who cares how she's doing." Then he pulled out his phone and showed me screenshots. Text messages from Rosalie to her little sister. "You're nothing. You're worthless." My stomach plummeted. Alex wasn't a predator at all. He was actually trying to be a lifeline, trying to make this kid feel like a person. And that's why he was still around her. He said the only way he could save Jade was by staying connected. That was all the proof I needed. The next day, I went to Rosalie's house with Alex, feeling like a marionette caught in the wildest, most twisted drama of my life. Rosalie's face turned a deep, guilty red when she saw us. Just then, Jade appeared in the hallway. For the first time, I really looked at her. She was so thin. She ran to Alex, jumped into his arms, and then kissed his cheek. He kissed her back. I involuntarily sighed, something he caught, because he blushed and quickly said, "I'm just affectionate." Rosalie, oddly cool now, let us inside. Alex cut straight to the chase. "You know why we're here," he said, his voice flat. Rosalie tried to play dumb, but Alex cut her off. "Why did you do this with him?" he asked, pointing at me. Why use such a horrible lie to guilt him into getting rid of the only person protecting your 11-year-old sister? Rosalie started to crumble, her face draining of color as she stammered excuses. I thought we were finally getting to the bottom of it, but then we heard it. Genuine, heart-wrenching sobbing coming from the bathroom. It was Jade. Alex and Rosalie immediately started screaming at each other, arguing over who should go check on her. So distracted they barely noticed when I was the one who went. And that's when I saw it. Jade, huddled on the floor, clutching a pregnancy test with 2 stark pink lines. My eyes went wide, my hands started shaking, and I just stood there, paralyzed by shock. Alex's words echoed in my head. If this happens, tell me immediately. I stumbled back out and screamed about what I just witnessed. Both Alex and Rosalie froze. What was truly bizarre was how quickly their tune changed. 30 seconds ago, they were practically in a fistfight over who cared more about Jade, but now Alex was suddenly claiming the test was probably fake, while Rosalie was ranting about how Jade had always been a drama queen. Then Jade herself came out, utterly broken, collapsing on the floor, apologizing to both of them. I honest to God couldn't think straight. I called the authorities. It might not have been the smartest move, but I was done trying to figure out who the real villain was in this insane story. Once they arrived, I explained everything, while both Alex and Rosalie frantically tried to convince the officers I was lying. They both got arrested, put in cuffs, and taken in for questioning. Jade was guided into a separate vehicle, taken to the station where she could finally explain the truth. As the cop cars pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk, my hands still shaking, realizing I'd have to follow them to give my own statement. The drive to the station felt like a lifetime. When I walked through those glass doors, the desk sergeant pointed me to a waiting area with uncomfortable plastic chairs. 20 minutes later, Detective Omar Tyson, a tall guy with gray hair and eyes that looked perpetually tired, came out and led me down a hallway. He put me in a small, windowless room with just a table and 2 chairs, told me someone would be with me soon, and then closed the door. I sat there for what felt like hours. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, a constant buzz in the quiet, and I could hear muffled voices from other rooms, but no one came for me. My stomach churned as I replayed everything, breaking into Alex's place, planting those drugs, going along with Rosalie's story without truly questioning it. I kept checking my phone, but there was no signal in that concrete box. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I kept wiping my sweaty palms on my jeans. Meanwhile, they'd taken Jade to a different part of the building, one of those special rooms for kids, with softer lighting and comfy chairs. Brendan McCarthy from CPS showed up, a younger guy with a beard who looked like he'd seen too much already. He sat with Jade while a kind female officer asked questions, making sure Jade felt safe. She looked so small in that big chair, nothing like the girl who jumped into Alex's arms. Her face was red from crying, and she kept pulling her sweater sleeves over her hands. Detective Tyson finally came back to my room after what my phone said was 3 hours. He sat across from me with a yellow legal pad and a recorder. He pressed record, stated the date and time, and then asked me to tell him everything from the beginning. So I did. I started with the lion party, Alex's absurdity, the attack, his blame on Rosalie. Then the coffee shop, Rosalie's chilling accusation, her claim about Alex grooming Jade. I explained my doubts, her refusal to give details, but ultimately, my belief that nobody could make up something so serious. Tyson just kept writing, his pen scratching across the paper, his face completely blank. I told him about breaking into Alex's place, finding the broken lion cage, my plea to Rosalie not to plant the drugs, and her unwavering resolve to do it anyway. I described the call to the cops, Alex's arrest, and Jade's furious text to Rosalie. I told him how that had initially convinced me we'd caught a predator. Then, Alex showing up at my house, the knife, the screenshots of Rosalie's abusive texts to Jade, and how that had shattered my entire perception of what was happening. When I got to the part about going to Rosalie's house and finding Jade with the pregnancy test, Detective Tyson finally looked up from his notes. I admitted I'd gone along with Rosalie's plan, even though something had felt wrong from the start. He asked why I didn't come forward sooner if I had doubts. I just sat there, trying to find an answer that didn't make me sound like an idiot. I mumbled something about hoping someone else was a bad guy, so I wouldn't have to figure it out myself, which sounded even worse out loud. He asked if I'd seen any actual evidence of Alex doing anything inappropriate before agreeing to help Rosalie. I had to admit I hadn't. I mean, there was something weird about Alex showing those texts of Rosalie calling Jade worthless, but then later he's kissing the kid on the cheek. That part still didn't quite add up to me. In another room, Alex was giving his version of events. He mentioned the hidden cameras he'd installed after the lion incident for security. The officer's eyes lit up, video evidence. Alex gave them his login for the cloud storage, and they started pulling footage. Rosalie, meanwhile, was in a third room, still trying to stick to her grooming story, but she kept tripping over her own lies. She couldn't explain why she needed to plant drugs if she truly believed Alex was abusing her sister. Her story kept changing. First Jade told her directly, then she saw texts, then she walked in on something suspicious. The detective interviewing her meticulously noted every contradiction. While all this was happening, CPS opened an emergency case file for Jade. Brendan McCarthy was officially assigned as her caseworker, scheduling an immediate safety assessment since both potential guardians were now in custody. Police seized Jade's phone, finding all those nasty texts she'd sent Rosalie, and more, flirty messages with some 15-year-old boy from school. The tech guys said they'd need to dig deeper. Late that night, after giving my statement 3 more times, they finally released me with a warning that I might face charges for the break-in. Detective Tyson handed me his business card and told me not to leave town. I drove home, feeling sick and exhausted, my head spinning. The next morning, my phone rang at 6:30, jarring me awake. It was Detective Tyson. They'd found something on Alex's security cameras that I needed to see immediately. My stomach dropped. I knew those cameras had caught everything. Me and Rosalie breaking in, planting the drugs, all in crystal clear high definition. I walked into a small viewing room where Detective Tyson had a laptop set up. He clicked play, and there it was. Me and Rosalie walking up to Alex's back door at 2 a.m. The camera angle showed everything. Rosalie picking the lock, me standing there, looking around like an idiot. Then, inside, another camera in Alex's bedroom. Rosalie pulling that bag of white powder from her jacket, me keeping watch by the door. She opened his dresser drawer, tucked it behind his socks, then we both left the way we came. Detective Tyson paused the video, looking at me with an expression that said he knew exactly what went down. He asked if I wanted to change my statement. I told him, yeah, that was definitely me. Rosalie convinced me Alex was doing bad things to her little sister. The detective wrote something down and said I needed a lawyer. Burglary and evidence tampering. Felonies. Serious prison time. He let me use the phone in the hallway. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial Chase Osborne, a lawyer my dad had used. Chase told me to stop talking to anyone until he got there, but to cooperate with basic stuff like fingerprints. He said the video was bad news, but my intent to protect a child might help. While I waited, I could hear activity down the hall. Brendan McCarthy from CPS was discussing emergency placement for Jade. They mentioned a foster mom, Ariella Hoffman, who had experience with complicated cases. I heard Jade crying, asking when she could see Alex, and my stomach churned again. Chase showed up an hour later, looking rumpled. He talked privately with Detective Tyson, then came back. Situation was rough, but not hopeless. The video was clear evidence, but my cooperation and circumstances could reduce the charges. Our best strategy was to show I was manipulated by Rosalie's story. Meanwhile, Jade was taken to the hospital for a forensic nurse examination, standard procedure for abuse or pregnancy concerns. I overheard an officer mention needing blood work, as home pregnancy tests could be wrong. Jade was apparently embarrassed, unsure if she'd even used the test correctly. The nurse would get real answers. Later that afternoon, Alex's lawyer, Luke Springer, arrived. I could hear him arguing with the prosecutor, Mackenzie Luna, about the drug charges. He pointed out the security footage proved Alex wasn't home when the drugs were planted. Luna had to admit the drug case was dead, but they still had concerns about Alex's relationship with Jade. Detective Tyson spent hours going through Jade's phone. He found messages between her and a 15-year-old boy from school, flirty stuff, talking about meeting up and doing things they shouldn't. Nothing explicit, but definitely not appropriate for an 11-year-old. This timing might explain the pregnancy test. Brendan McCarthy interviewed Jade when she returned from the hospital. I could hear parts through the thin walls. Jade talking about how Rosalie always made her feel worthless and stupid. She showed him old texts where Rosalie called her terrible names. Jade kept saying Alex was the only adult who ever made her feel special, explaining her upset when he was arrested. The next day, the blood test results came back. Jade wasn't pregnant. The nurse thought it was either a false positive or, more likely, Jade simply didn't use the home test correctly. Everyone seemed relieved, but questions remained. Why did an 11-year-old have a pregnancy test? And what was going on with that boy? Alex, meeting with Luke Springer, admitted he did kiss Jade on the cheek and bought her presents sometimes. He said he was just trying to be nice because Rosalie was so cruel. Springer told him it still looked inappropriate to everyone else. Good intentions or not, it was a mess. The next morning, Rosalie's lawyer, Corbin Hess, arrived. He tried to paint her as a desperate sister protecting Jade, but the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage of us planting drugs, her lying to the police. She was facing serious charges. The prosecutor told Corbin that Rosalie could face years for false reporting and evidence tampering. I watched through the window as Rosalie's face went white. 3 days passed with everyone still being questioned. Detective Tyson called me back in. He'd found something else on Jade's phone, text with that 15-year-old boy about running away together. The kid wrote about being ready for adult things and doing stuff they shouldn't be talking about. This explained the pregnancy test. CPS got heavily involved. They determined neither Alex nor Rosalie could care for Jade. Alex had major boundary problems, even if not a predator, and Rosalie was emotionally abusive. They recommended foster care for Jade and professional help for both adults. That same afternoon, Mackenzie Luna, the prosecutor, met with me and Chase. She laid out all the evidence against me. Security footage, my confession, everything that could send me to prison for years. But then she offered a deal, plead guilty to misdemeanor trespassing, testify against Rosalie, and they dropped the felony charges. Chase practically grabbed my arm. Take it immediately. That video evidence will destroy you at trial. Talk about security cameras coming back to bite everyone. Alex put them up after his lion tried to eat someone, and now they were showing a midnight breaking and entering special starring 2 people who really should have thought things through better. My hand shaking, I agreed and signed the papers right there. The next day, Alex's drug charges were officially dismissed. Everyone knew they were planted. But CPS still said he couldn't have unsupervised contact with Jade because of his boundary issues. Luke told Alex to accept it for now and work on proving he could maintain appropriate boundaries. Alex was furious but agreed. He didn't have much choice. Within a week, the local news picked up the story about the false drug planting. They didn't use our names, but everyone in town figured it out. Alex's boss put him on unpaid leave. His reputation was ruined, even with the charges dropped. Meanwhile, Jade started therapy with Heather Bell, a specialist in childhood trauma. I heard from the foster mom that in their first session, Jade kept bouncing between defending Alex and blaming Rosalie. She didn't even understand what appropriate boundaries meant. The therapist had a monumental task ahead of her. Detective Tyson tracked down the schoolboy messaging Jade. The kid admitted they talked about sex, but swore nothing physical ever happened. His parents looked ready to die from embarrassment and grounded him on the spot. The detective told them they were lucky their son wasn't facing charges, given Jade's age. 2 weeks into this legal mess, Rosalie finally broke down during interrogation. She admitted she planted the drugs because she was jealous of how close Alex was with Jade. She felt replaced by her own sister and wanted Alex gone. Corbin tried to spin it as temporary emotional distress, but the prosecutor wasn't buying it. Rosalie sat there crying, a pathetic sight, admitting she destroyed lives over jealousy. The school counselor came forward with more information about Jade's behavior, seeking attention from older boys, passing inappropriate notes. This pattern started when Rosalie's verbal abuse toward Jade worsened. Reports showed Jade trying to sit on older boys' laps, writing love letters to 8th graders. The poor kid was so desperate for positive attention, she'd take it from anyone. All this evidence painted a messed-up picture where nobody was completely innocent or guilty. Alex crossed boundaries trying to help. Rosalie was abusive and vindictive. Jade was a confused kid acting out. I felt sick realizing how deep this whole mess went and how I'd gotten pulled right into the middle of it. My community service would start soon, and I'd have to live with my part in making everything worse. 3 weeks later, Mackenzie Luna met with Rosalie and Corbin. Mackenzie laid out the deal like she was ordering lunch. 18 months probation, mandatory counseling twice a week, and parenting classes every Saturday if Rosalie ever wanted to see Jade again without supervision. Rosalie's hands shook as she looked at the papers, asking Corbin if there was another way. He told her straight up, with the evidence against her, this was a gift. She could be looking at 5 years. Rosalie kept pushing back, claiming she was protecting her sister, but Mackenzie wasn't having any of it. The prosecutor knew the whole story now. 2 days later, I had my own court date. Chase sat next to me as I stood before an older judge. She looked at me over her glasses like she could see right through me, and sentenced me to 100 hours of community service and a year of probation. Then she lectured me for 10 minutes about thinking for myself, instead of following others into stupid situations. I just stood there, nodding, saying, "Yes, ma'am," every time she paused. Chase had warned me to keep my mouth shut. The judge said I was lucky the prosecutor dropped the felony charges. Meanwhile, Alex started seeing a therapist Luke found for him. Alex told me, later the first session was rough. The therapist made him walk through every interaction with Jade. He thought he was helping her by giving her attention when Rosalie was cruel. But the therapist helped him see how gifts and cheek kisses to an 11-year-old looked from the outside. The therapist said Alex wasn't a predator, but he had serious work to do on understanding appropriate boundaries. Alex seemed relieved he wasn't a monster, but also confused about where the line was. At the same time, Jade had her own therapy sessions with Heather. Ariella, the foster mom, told the caseworker Jade had admitted something big during her 4th session. She'd faked the pregnancy test for attention. She saw it in a movie, bought the test at a gas station, and peed on it wrong on purpose to make it positive. She felt terrible about lying but thought it was the only way to make Alex and Rosalie stop fighting and see she needed help. Heather called this progress. Jade was starting to understand how her actions affected others. Ariella updated Brenda McCarthy. Jade was eating better, gaining weight, but still had nightmares, waking up crying for Alex. Ariella had to be firm about the no-contact order, even when Jade begged to call him. She'd sit with Jade, let her cry, then gently remind her the rules were to keep everyone safe. Progress was slow, and Jade still didn't truly understand why she couldn't see the people she considered family. A month later, Rosalie finally took Mackenzie's plea deal. The courtroom was almost empty. She accepted the terms: therapy twice a week, parenting classes every Saturday for a year. The judge warned her that any violation meant immediate incarceration for 5 years. Rosalie just nodded, signing the papers, looking smaller, the fight gone out of her. Around the same time, Alex's workplace finished their internal investigation. Luke had provided context about what really happened. They concluded Alex committed no crimes, but the whole thing was a PR nightmare. They transferred him to a different department across the building with a 20% pay cut. Luke said he was lucky they didn't fire him. Alex took it without arguing, started showing up early every day, proving himself. His new boss treated him like he was on thin ice anyway. Detective Tyson called me to his office a week later to sign final paperwork, closing the criminal investigation. He said everything was resolved through plea deals, no trials. While I signed, he told me this case was one of the messiest he'd seen in 20 years. Nobody was completely evil, but nobody was completely innocent either. Alex had boundary issues, Rosalie had control and jealousy problems, and Jade was a confused kid caught in adult drama. Even I had my part in making things worse by not thinking for myself. He hoped we'd all learn something. 6 weeks into therapy, Jade was showing tiny signs of progress. Heather told Brendan that Jade was beginning to understand healthy relationships and why Alex's affection wasn't appropriate, even if he meant well. She was also starting to see how Rosalie's verbal abuse had pushed her to seek attention from anyone. Heather said it would take months, maybe years, to undo the damage, but Jade was young and resilient. I started my community service at a local youth center the next Monday. It felt weird, working with kids around Jade's age. The supervisor didn't know my whole story, but gave me strict rules about professional boundaries. My first shift, I organized sports equipment, watching other volunteers interact, clear physical distance, never alone with a child. It made me think hard about how easily adults could affect kids, how lines could be crossed without realizing it. 2 months passed before CPS let Rosalie see Jade again, but only for an hour a week, supervised. I heard about it from the youth center supervisor, who knew Ariella. The first visit was at the CPS office. Rosalie showed up early, picking at her fingernails. Jade was already there, coloring, barely looking up. Rosalie tried to talk, but Jade just colored. After 10 minutes of no response, Rosalie started crying right there. The social worker had to remind her to keep it together for Jade's sake. When the hour was up, Jade walked out without saying goodbye. Rosalie sat in her car, sobbing for another hour, but she came back the next week and the week after that. Meanwhile, Alex had to move out of his nice apartment. The pay cut made it impossible. Friends helped him pack into a U-Haul. His new place was a studio on the other side of town, where you hear everything. He deleted all his social media and stopped going to the bars. A mutual friend ran into him at the grocery store and told me Alex looked different, more careful, always checking who was around before speaking. The boy from Jade's school ended up transferring districts. His parents wanted him to have a fresh start. Heather told Ariella that Jade seemed relieved he was gone. In therapy, Jade admitted she felt pressured to do things she wasn't ready for but didn't know how to say no. She thought if she said no, he wouldn't like her, and then nobody at school would talk to her. 3 weeks later, I was at the grocery store grabbing frozen pizzas when I turned a corner and almost ran my cart into Rosalie. We both froze, then just nodded. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but more put together. Her hair was clean. She wore actual clothes instead of pajamas. Neither of us said anything about what happened. We just stood there for maybe 5 seconds before going our separate ways. But there was this unspoken understanding between us, like we both knew we'd messed up bad and were trying to fix it. 3 months after everything went down, Heather had Jade write letters to both Alex and Rosalie as therapy homework. Not to be sent, just to process feelings. She wrote about being mad at Rosalie for calling her worthless. She wrote about being confused why Alex's hugs and kisses felt wrong when he was the only nice person. Heather helped her understand adults shouldn't show affection to kids that way, even with good intentions. Brenda McCarthy called Ariella with an update, and she mentioned it to my supervisor at the youth center during my shift. Jade was doing way better in school, turning in homework, participating. She'd made 2 friends her own age. Ariella said Jade was a different kid. She still had bad days, but mostly, she was a normal 11-year-old. Her art teacher said Jade had real talent. Around the same time, Rosalie hit the halfway point of her therapy. Her therapist reported real improvement. Turns out Rosalie's own mom had been awful to her, always putting her down. It didn't excuse what she did to Jade, but it explained why she didn't know how to be a good sister. The therapist was helping her break those patterns. Alex's therapist cleared him as not dangerous to children after 3 months, but still recommended he continue for his boundary issues. Alex agreed, even though it wasn't court-ordered. Luke told me Alex seemed genuinely committed to changing. My probation officer did my monthly check-in and said I was doing great with community service. Working with the kids at the youth center was actually rewarding. I coached basketball, organized game nights, always super careful about boundaries, never alone with any child. 4 months after that horrible night, Heather had a breakthrough with Jade. Jade said she was ready to forgive Rosalie for the mean things, but needed more time with Alex. She understood now that his affection wasn't right, even if he tried to help. She could see the difference between appropriate adult behavior and what Alex did. Heather said this was huge progress for an 11-year-old to grasp such complicated emotions. The next week, CPS had a big meeting and decided to keep Jade with Ariella for another 6 months, but gave Rosalie more visits, twice a week. Brendan McCarthy told me this when I ran into him. He said they were working towards getting Jade back with her sister if Rosalie stayed on track. The visits were going better. Around the same time, Alex did something unexpected. He wrote a long letter to CPS, taking full blame for crossing boundaries with Jade. Luke Springer showed me a copy. Alex didn't ask to see Jade or anything. He just wanted them to know he understood what he did wrong and supported whatever was best for her. Luke said this actually helped Alex's case, showing responsibility. My 100 hours of community service at the youth center were ending. My supervisor pulled me aside on my last day and said I was good with kids. She offered me a part-time job, minimum wage, but paid work. I took it. Honestly, working with those kids was the first thing in months that made me feel like I wasn't a total screw-up. 5 months after that crazy night at Rosalie's house, something big happened in one of their therapy sessions. Heather Bell called Brendan about it, and he told me when I saw him. Rosalie had finally given Jade a real apology for all the mean things she'd said. Not a half-hearted sorry, but a real breakdown where she admitted she'd been awful and wrong. Jade actually cried in her sister's arms for the first time since this whole mess started. Heather called it a major turning point. The judge scheduled a review, hearing a week later. I had to go because of my probation. The judge looked through all the reports, therapists, CPS, probation officers. She officially closed the active CPS case, but with conditions. Jade would stay with Ariella for 3 more months while Rosalie finished her court requirements. If things kept going well, they could start working on getting Jade home permanently. Rosalie sat there crying when the judge said there was real hope for reunification. Meanwhile, Alex was rebuilding his work life. His new boss knew nothing of the full story. All he saw was someone showing up early, staying late, doing solid work. 6 months after his transfer, they promoted him to team lead with a small raise. Alex kept his head down, focused on proving himself. He stopped going to bars, deleted social media. Luke told me Alex was different now, more careful. Jade's life at school changed completely. Her grades went from barely passing to B's and A's. She joined the art club, made friends her own age. Ariella told Brendan that Jade was like a whole different kid. She still had bad days, but mostly, she was a normal 11-year-old, worried about homework and what to wear. The art teacher said Jade had real talent. Rosalie got herself together financially. She found a better job at a medical office with health insurance, which covered her therapy. She'd been sober for 4 months, going to support group meetings. Her therapist reported Rosalie was committed to change. She even started saving for a bigger apartment with a proper bedroom for Jade. 6 months after I'd called the cops, Detective Tyson called me to sign final paperwork. What makes me wonder is how Jade could write those therapy letters about Alex's behavior, but still have such mixed feelings about him. She understood his actions were wrong, but couldn't fully separate that from him being nice to her. It just shows how confusing this whole situation must be for an 11-year-old trying to process such complicated emotions. When I got there, he had a whole stack of forms. He told me Jade was doing great, making progress. Alex and Rosalie were doing better too, staying out of trouble, working on themselves. Then he said something that stuck with me. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can start climbing back up. He'd seen it hundreds of times. My probation finally ended after a full year. Chase met me at the courthouse. The judge reviewed my case and said I'd completed everything successfully. My record would be sealed after one more year of good behavior. Chase told me I got lucky, but also made smart choices by cooperating. He said I'd learned expensive lessons about thinking for myself. 2 weeks later, Chase called to tell me Rosalie had finished all her court stuff. Parenting classes, therapy, anger management, she did it all without missing a single appointment. Brendan from CPS showed up at my work at the youth center with paperwork. They approved a plan for Rosalie to start getting Jade back. Supervised visits, then unsupervised weekends at Rosalie's new 2-bedroom apartment. She'd saved for it, a real bed and desk for Jade. Brendan said if everything stayed stable for 3 months, Jade could move back home full-time. Alex wasn't allowed anywhere near Jade. But Brendan mentioned Alex had been sending $200 a month to a college savings account he helped set up, almost $2,000 already. Alex never asked for updates, just kept the deposits coming. His bank statements showed he was living on ramen and cheap groceries. Luke told Brendan that Alex wanted Jade to have options when she turned 18, even if he couldn't be part of her life anymore. 3 months passed, and Jade packed up her stuff at Ariella's to move back with Rosalie. I helped them carry boxes. Jade showed me drawings from art class. She gotten really good. Rosalie had framed some for the living room. Their first week was rough, Jade testing boundaries, Rosalie struggling not to snap. But they went to therapy with Heather, who taught them active listening. It worked most of the time. Jade started bringing friends home, something that never happened before. The youth center became my whole life. I worked there 5 days a week, teaching basketball, helping with homework. My boss said I had a way of spotting kids who needed extra attention, the ones hiding bruises or coming in hungry. One kid reminded me of Jade, flinching when adults raised their voices. I made sure he always had snacks, knew he could talk to me. We got him connected with a counselor before things escalated. Knowing what to look for because of Jade probably saved that kid. My phone buzzed one random Tuesday, almost a year after that crazy night. Alex's name popped up. First time since everything went down. His text was short. Doing good at new job, hope you are too. Sober 8 months, still seeing therapist. I stared at it for a long time before typing back I was glad he was doing better. We weren't friends anymore, never would be. But I didn't hate him. We both made terrible choices. The difference was, we both learned from them. Rosalie sent me a picture a few weeks later, Jade at her middle school science fair. 2nd place for a plant project. Jade was holding a huge ribbon, genuinely smiling, not the fake one she used to do. Rosalie wrote that Jade was getting straight B's, honor roll last quarter. Still went to therapy, processing everything healthily. The nightmares mostly stopped. She wasn't seeking attention from older kids anymore. She joined art and drama club, hung out with friends at the mall. Normal kid stuff she never got to do before. Looking back, that whole insane week changed every single person involved. Alex learned about boundaries the hard way and lost access to a kid he genuinely cared about. Rosalie had to face her own abuse and how it affected Jade. Jade got the help she desperately needed. And though the process was traumatic, I learned to think for myself and found a job where I could actually help kids who reminded me of her. Nobody got the outcome they wanted at the start, but everyone got what they actually needed to become better people. These days, my life is pretty boring, and I am completely fine with that. I wake up, go to work at the youth center, come home, watch TV or play video games. No drama, no late-night break-ins, no pregnancy scares with 11-year-olds. Sometimes I think about how I used to want my life to be more interesting, more exciting. That week taught me that boring is underrated. When people come to me with their problems now, I think real hard before getting involved. Most of the time, I give advice and step back, letting them handle their own situations. The youth center kids are different because that's my job, and I'm trained for it now. But in my personal life, I've learned that other people's drama rarely ends well for anyone involved. Well, folks, that's my wild ride from chaos to calm. It's truly been an intense journey. What about you? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you thought you were doing the right thing, only to realize you were completely manipulated? Or, have you ever seen a situation unravel like this, where no one was entirely innocent? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I really want to hear what you think.